Order. I will recognize myself for purposes of an opening statement. Today we meet to fulfill our obligation to share with the Budget Committee our views of the fiscal year 2019 budget. And those views must begin with the state of our economy. After 8 years of Obamanomics and the promise of a recovery summer, we found ourselves stuck in a pothole economy averaging only 1.6% economic growth. Some decide to dub that secular stagnation, but what it really was bad tax policy and bad regulatory policy. With the advent of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, however, all that has changed. Unemployment is now at a 17-year low. Wage growth is at the fastest pace in a decade. More than $5 trillion in new wealth has been created. So the historic Tax Cut and Jobs Act is working to benefit individuals, families, and job creators. The President's Council of Economic Advisors also announced that if the tax cuts were made permanent, we would put another $4 to $7 trillion back into the economy. History has shown us that well-designed tax relief, pro-growth tax relief plans more than pay for themselves. You can go all the way back to the Coolidge tax relief of the 20s. GDP grew at an average annual rate of 4.7%, and the unemployment rate was cut in half. And after these tax relief was enacted, the U.S. actually had a budget surplus. You can look to the tax relief of the Kennedy era, where marginal individual income tax rates were reduced. GDP rose by 8%, and within 5 years had risen to 48%. Once the Reagan tax relief was fully implemented, real growth averaged 4.6% for the remainder of his presidency, and this led to a quarter of a century of strong economic growth, averaging 3.4%, even combating several different recessions. We know that if the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, for it to pay for itself, we need only grow at 2.85%, and after back-to-back quarters of 3% economic growth with the right mix of regulatory policy, I think we are capable of achieving that benchmark and absolutely surpassing it. But there are still clouds on the horizon, not the least of which is the national debt clock, which still rolls out of control in front of me and to my left and my right on the monitor. We now see that the national debt is almost $21 trillion, which is more than $63,000 for every American citizen. It is totally unsustainable. So there is a spending-driven debt crisis in America, and I believe it still is the greatest existential threat in our country that receives little to no attention in Washington. If we do not wake up, we will find ourselves as a second-rate economic power, a second-rate military power, and a second-rate moral authority. So it is important that all the various government agencies and programs within our jurisdiction receive very, very careful scrutiny to make sure that they are meeting the taxpayer test, that the benefits of the program can actually be stated, that we measure programs not by their stated purpose, but by their actual achievements, and we balance that with the cost to our hard-working taxpayers. And so with that, we look forward to presenting our budget views and estimates to the Budget Committee, and certainly the minority side of the aisle has the absolute opportunity to file their minority views and estimates, and I have no doubt that the Budget Committee will read each report very carefully with rapt attention, as they always do. With that, I yield back the balance of my time, and I recognize the ranking member for an opening statement.